Morning, morning, morning. This is Paul here. Welcome back to AAC TVV. I think it's only right to share this journey, telling the good and the bad, in case someone's watching this and considering the idea of keeping seahorses and or culturing marine fish of any description for the very first time like me. Any breeder of any animal will tell you often there's tears of both joy and pain. I had hoped this second update of this series would be about the build, the aquarium systems themselves, etc. And of course the characters starring at Seahorse stables. But I'm afraid that we'll have to wait until the following episodes. When I started this seahorse pipefish culturing idea, I knew immediately that this was going to be a long journey and a serious learning curve, just like with anything reef or marine aquarium related. Trials and tribulations, peaks and troughs are most definitely the order of the day in this field, that's a given. Fortunately, I'm pretty used to it. You have to be when you're handling so many fish and corals on a week-by-week basis like I do for AAC. There's always a plate spinning somewhere that's about to fall off. It's how you spot these things early on and rescue or divert those situations, because if you don't act quickly, it's often too late. So a recap first. I was meant to collect the parents' Erector Seahorse stock some 4 to 5 months long before the building was actually completed, so I was running really late. So many building complications that needed addressing. In seahorse years, 6 is like 4 years due to their rapid reproductive rate and life cycle. The original parent stock was already aging and had produced thousands of previous offspring, so I was very much on a tight timeline of success or possible failure. Now the horses were in their final years. An adult Erector Seahorse is fairly old at 3 to 4 years, and we weren't sure how they would move from Terry's system to mine. But we had no choice but to proceed. Late, I might add again. I took extra care to make sure everything was perfect before going to collect the adults. Tanks all cycled correctly and mature, which took a couple of months alone, and added to the end of the total build, which was 4 months. So some 6 months from when the parent stock was first offered to me, and of course the concept. At this point, the parents were still producing eggs and fry on a regular basis like clockwork. But as Terry, the previous breeder, had decided enough was enough and wanted to retire, the horses were separated into their respective groups of males and females so they didn't produce any more young. The workload is immense when you're doing it on a commercial scale like he was, so a pause was needed ahead of the move so the system could start to be shut down at Terry's and that the parents weren't carrying young or eggs, of course, which could have caused a miscarriage during the move. Finally, at the end of April, it was time to collect the broodstock. It was so exciting, I can't tell you. Terry had saved a population of 4 large males and 3 females, more than enough to get something going, we both thought. Then 2 weeks later, after I moved the parents to their new home at Seahorse Stables, I had a serious problem on my hands. 2 of the males had developed gas bubble disease, shortened to GBD, which is often irreversible and fatal. This causes the seahorses to have buoyancy issues and is referred to as pouch emphysema. This only affects the males in this case and not everyone, as it's not a contagion. I suspect that just the minor water quality chemistry differences, despite careful acclimation and move, was likely enough to put enormous stress on the adults. I consulted Terry straight away and other helpful folk, online resources as well, as ultimately I didn't have a lot of time to intervene. I also consulted a lady's website called Seahorse Savvy, highly recommended as a resource should you be considering keeping seahorses. In order to solve this type of GBD issue, it seemed the only way was to evacuate the pouch. That is, to release the trapped gases from the pouch by opening up the pouch on the males and releasing the said trapped gas. For this you need something tiny like a 20 gauge straw or cannula that isn't too sharp. And that's when I realised this was going to be difficult. Not a single website, doctor, surgery or vets was prepared to just let me have the single cannula or multiples. I even explained I didn't need the needle, just the plastic part of the cannula in order to evacuate the pouch, but I was refused everywhere I went. All I had was a WD-40 red straw, which was sharp to the touch at the end, so I filed it down on the edges and tried my first evacuation, which seemed to go well, but the problem returned again in just a few days, sadly. Unfortunately, by the time I did manage to get my hands on a proper cannula from a customer called the Surgeon Reefer at AAC, sadly I'd lost both of the larger breeding males. I think they simply couldn't handle the stress, like old men under the knife, and the move had proven too much for these old boys. Remember, the males in this instance do most of the work, so they tire faster than the females. Also, at the time, I'd started to notice that only 2 out of 3 of the females were feeding, and only 1 of the males out of the remaining 2. And since that day, neither of these 2 I have seen feed on anything despite presenting live mysis, live river shrimp, or any type of frozen food of any grade. Sadly, I may lose these 2 as well. They are, I believe, simply just too old. The non-feeding female has dropped some eggs, and both he and she seem like they have a good body weight even to this day, but they are also extremely shy compared to the remaining 2 females and male that simply jump on the food. So at this moment in time, I'm just sitting back and observing, but still hopeful that we'll see another clutch of babies from the remaining healthy broodstock from this rather ancient seahorse population, as some dancing still takes place daily. Females, I'm told, produce eggs almost every 16 to 21 days, and the males incubate for around the same time too. So fingers crossed, it is still early days. In the meantime, in more positive news, I've been learning to raise 3 tiny babies that were given to me by Terry at the time I collected the adults. And I also have a group of teenage erector seahorses, and of course I have the flame pipefish to keep me on my toes. So for now, I'm just sitting back and learning a little more about the necessary food cultures should I get lucky, such as rearing brine shrimp and rotifers to different stages, preparing for the idea that one day I'll at least see our first brood and stand a chance of rearing a few ponies. Apologies for the negative sounding update, but I didn't want this unreported, and I think it's important to show that even someone with my experience has good and bad days at the aquarium office. In the next episode, I hope to share the build, so subscribe to get those notifications, and I will catch you again soon at AAC Seaball Stables. Bye.